Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to Big Blend Radio's Books and Authors Show. You know, we love to do these shows where we chat with authors around the world about their works. And today we're excited because we have Gary Bourne joining us. He's one of the world's leading international arbitration advocates and authors. He's an international lawyer that, just call him 1-800-GARY when something goes wrong when you're traveling around the world. I'm just kidding. But today he is joining us to talk about his debut novel, which is a riveting spy story, and it's called The File. It releases March 28th, 2023 through Histra Books. So welcome to the show, Gary. How are you?
Thanks so much, Lisa. I'm doing well, and thank you also for that very flattering introduction. I'll be waiting for all of our listeners to be calling for legal advice.
Yes, 1-800. That's it. What did you do? Well, this is interesting because, your book goes into Swiss bank accounts and everything, stuff that I grew up listening to. And now I'm like, oh, we rarely actually hear Swiss bank accounts nowadays, right? I think there's all kinds of little offshore things going. I heard, is it North or South Dakota that has not offshore banking, but they're doing
There are a variety of U.S. states, I think South Dakota amongst others, where you can, through your corporate ownership and ownership of real estate and other things, not disclose your identity. And naturally, there are concerns about what that lets both domestic and also foreign individuals and companies do. The File, though, is about the more traditional, historic number with bank accounts. And the basic thesis is that in the last months of the Second World War, the Nazi regime, the top leadership, believing that they might finally lose the war, took steps to collect and then hide billions of dollars of assets in numbered Swiss accounts, so that if in fact the war was lost, they could come along subsequently and use that money. And the heroine in The File, Sarah West, happens upon those documents in the wreckage of a Nazi bomber that she chances upon in the African jungles of Uganda, and the story takes off from there.
Yeah, I love this. I don't want to give it away too much, but I think this is so cool that she finds it in a bomber. And she's a little badass too. You start the book and here she is sewing herself up, stitching herself up from a wound. And I'm like, okay, because we're all tired. Us women are tired of women protagonists, and I hate the word protagonist, but the main characters, women characters in movies and in books, always tripping over a log with a high heel or something. We want to, we are not dumb. We're not unable to stitch ourselves up, carry a Uzi, and be able to run through the jungle. Let's cue in Creedence Clearwater anytime. But you know what I mean? It's we want that, and I think for so many years we've been portrayed as not being able to be like that.
No, absolutely. And that's, I think, one of the attractive features of Sarah. It's one of the things that, in fact, drew me to her. And she's just an ordinary person. She's someone like you or me or any one of the people listening to this podcast who gets thrust into extraordinary circumstances. The various evil people who chase her in order to get the documents she finds on that crashed Nazi bomber in the middle of the jungle expect her to be tripping over her high heels, or at a minimum just getting lost in the jungle. But as it turns out, Sarah had spent a good number of years traveling with her dad and through her university in jungles just like that all around the world. And she proves a lot harder to pin down than the Russian hit team, the agents who are trying to catch her, and the documents in order to get at the money in those numbered Swiss bank accounts. And at some point, she finally decides that she doesn't want to be hunted. She wants, in fact, to hunt a little bit and turns the tables on the folks pursuing her. And if you look in the cover behind you, you can see the bamboo spear that she uses to good effect against some of the seasoned operatives.
Give everybody like, that's a spear.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
a spear. It started out as a bamboo stock, but it ended up in her hands as a spear.
We call that a good assegai, where I came from in South Africa. That's going to get you. But, this is interesting, too, when you talk about the bomber being down. There are numerous places around the world, even South America, where these bombers are still being found. So what led you to the bomber story, like this down bomber? I mean, because it is kind of fascinating. And there's one that was turned into an Airbnb or something, I think.
Oh, really? I missed
South
that
America.
one. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, when sort of on one level, when you think about the basic narrative of Sarah West alone in the jungle in Africa, finds a Nazi bomber that nobody else has found for 70 years. And on it, there's this file of documents. It might sound implausible if you say it fast, but actually, as you rightly point out, whether it's in the South Pacific, whether it's in Indochina, whether it's in Latin America, these kinds of wrecks from war have been found with amazing regularity over the years, and naturally they have in them what's in them. The idea that a secret mission carrying these kinds of documents would go down in remote areas of Africa is not at all that implausible in that context. And that's exactly how the story starts. She stumbles on this cache of documents which show whoever it is that has the documents how you get billions of dollars in Nazi assets in numbered Swiss bank accounts. Also the names of the Nazis' leading spies in the United States, which leads to another bad actor, the deputy director of the CIA, trying to himself track her down to prevent his family's traitorous past from being exposed. And the story is basically how she flees from and eludes the Russian and the American mercenaries, essentially, who are chasing her.
You see, but this is always interesting. I think the CIA, you using the CIA in there, that is a really, it's very topical. It's something that a lot of us are always going, how good or bad are the CIA guys and gals, and as well as the FBI, because there's turncoats in both. It's true. It is
That's
true.
exactly. I mean, if you read the headlines from just a couple of weeks ago and look at the charges that have been leveled at some quite senior counterintelligence officers, officials in the United States, that it's not at all an implausible storyline. The basic storyline in the file is that the deputy director of the CIA, the grandson of a leading American politician, the son of a leading American politician, has secrets to hide, and then basically on his own, not really the CIA, but on his own, puts together a team of operatives to track down Sarah, and he and the Russians are in competition to catch her first.
See, but and tell everybody about the timeline of when this occurred.
So the story begins, the first chapter of the book is actually out of chronological sequence. It's basically a snippet from her flight from the Russian and also the Americans that are chasing her through the jungle, and she's wounded. She sews herself up. The story really begins, though, in terms of chronology, in the last week of World War II, when a Nazi bomber takes off from Berlin, the last functioning airport in the capital, as American and Russian tanks close in on the city. On the airplane is the Nazi officer who's been entrusted with these documents that would provide the key to untold riches that would enable a Fourth Reich to rise again. And Sarah stumbles on those after they've lain undiscovered for 70 years in the depths of the African jungle. I've actually been to those jungles, and trust me, an aircraft wreck could lie undiscovered for 70 years. The Ruwenzori Mountains, where the initial chapters of the book are set, are among the most rugged and isolated parts of the world that you can imagine. And then the storyline after she discovers it is over the ensuing months. She's chased by both the traitorous deputy director of the CIA and the Russian KGB agent, former Russian KGB agent, who wants the money for himself. She's chased across Africa, across the Sahara Desert.
This is so cool. This is so cool. This is something that, like, when I grew up, these were kind of those stories. And I don't know if it's just because we lived in South Africa and I graduated high school there and everything, but it was always the KGB. It was always, World War II Nazi spies in the KGB. And I don't understand, what happened? Why they were always like these little fighting, not little, but like crazy fighting entities that were always after each other's stuff for some reason. There was always this thing, and I don't know what it is, but maybe it was just my era of going to high school in that time frame. But you just don't hear as much about it now in these days. So that's what I think is also very special about your story, is that you're taking people off to remote areas, and you're right, those jungles, and jungles are like that. Jungles know how to mulch. They know how to bury. And they're like, we're going, that is what we have good topsoil for, you know what I mean? We've got moisture, we're going to do that, and I'm sure there's snakes and all kinds of, there's all kinds of things in jungles, but it can totally happen. And Africa did play some interesting things in regards to World War II. And the Russians did hide out in Africa too.
Absolutely.
During World War II. There was, even before that, there was just always this craziness, this wild streak that is not kind of taught to you in basic, high school history. There's all these.
Exactly. Yeah. Now there's some other interesting twists on the story. At least I think they're interesting for readers. There's the relationship between the principal protagonists and those who appear to be close to them. So Sarah has a relationship with a young CIA agent who's the ex-CIA agent who's sent to kill her by the evil deputy director. And the two of them, Sarah and Jeb, that's his name, don't trust each other at all. They're thrown together in very, unfortunate circumstances where he's sent to kill her and she tries to kill him. But notwithstanding that, they managed to strike up an increasingly warm relationship. I don't want to spoil things too much.
Yeah, you can. I was about to go, warning.
Spoiler alert. But they have a complicated relationship, which is in a sense mirrored, maybe contrasted with the relationship between the principal Russian villain and his girlfriend, which on the surface appears to be very trusting. And I definitely don't want to do a spoiler alert now, but it too is a complex relationship that evolves over the course of the book.
Okay, so now I have to dig into the legal side of things, because I don't know what it is, but all lawyers that I know end up writing books. We do a law series every fourth Wednesday, and attorney Ward Heinrichs, he's writing a book where he's bringing people down to, like, are you the devil? Are you God? Like the whole kind of crazy, like he's just gone off, but I don't know what it is, but attorneys somehow end up writing novels. And there's two things that come to me about this. One is about those relationships, about trust, about, okay, you have to really watch each other's sides and understand how to present or not present, or, you know what I mean? There's like it's a game of chess.
And that's a very interesting observation. I hadn't thought about it, but I think that's exactly right. A lot of what lawyers do is, in a sense, relationships. They have a pretty carefully regulated relationship with their clients. They owe duties of loyalty and trust to their clients. Their clients do, in many cases, trust them. But that is a fraught relationship because clients also mistrust their lawyers. Just watch any TV show. And at the
And
same
all the
time,
lawyer jokes, come
no,
on.
exactly. And at the same time that you have that relationship, then you have the relationship with those on the other side, whether it's a transaction or a litigation, a dispute of some sort, which is also regulated. It's interesting. Lawyers, although one thinks about lawyers as sort of paper pushers and lost in footnotes or legal documentation, a lot of what they do is relationships.
Yeah, it's really true. And understanding, like we just did the segment with Ward, and I asked him a question that was totally politically correct, and he just sat there and he's like, and I'm like, come on. He goes, no, I have clients. I have a business. No, I'm not answering that. And I'm like, come on, you're such a lawyer. But it's so funny, because we do push we go as far as we can on the envelope with him. And he does too. But then it's like, no, you're not getting me. I try to sneak one in on him all the time and it doesn't work. And Nancy's even worse. But he's like, oh, why are you doing this to me? I don't know. It's fun. But the truth is, it's about relationships, but also those attention to details, and that's something I've learned too. And so being, because you've written, I was looking at you on Amazon. Everyone look up Gary Bourne on Amazon. I mean, you should open a library just for lawyers and legal, because it's intense. Like what you write, intense, like serious stuff, right? I will not understand.
Let me assure you, the file is very serious. It's more serious than my law books, but although the file is my first work of fiction, I have written a number of law books, so to speak.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But the attention to detail, you can't. This is the thing about doing a spy story. You have to have those details in there, not overshow the details. So it's kind of like a court case in a way to me.
In a lot of ways, it is. There are both similarities. There are also contrasts. A court case, you really do have to pay enormous attention to detail, and you never know which detail may ultimately prove to be the one that is decisive or pivotal. But you have to be right about the facts. You have to be right about the law. You have to look up the cases, cite the cases properly, cite the language of the statute properly. But writing a fiction work is similar in some ways, very different in other ways. It's different in that you actually can make stuff up.
That's fine.
Indeed, you're required to, right? There is no, in a sense, there is no reality. Mine is a little different in the sense that it's based in historical and geographical truth, and you have to be honest about that. You have to describe the jungle properly. You have to describe Swiss bank accounts properly, and I think I do that. But then you have huge freedom. And it's in fact very daunting. It's challenging. You sit there with a blank piece of paper and this chapter is going to be about Sarah fleeing through the jungle. But what exactly does it mean to flee through the jungle chased by 24 Russian mercenaries? Figuring out what that actually is a huge challenge, but it's enormously exhilarating.
So what led you to this story and deciding to go from, okay, all these legal books that like a person like me doesn't want to or know how to read to, okay, here's something that we could all read and enjoy? That turn of table, what led you to say, okay, I'm going to do a debut. I'm going to start writing novels, right? Because I know this isn't going to be your first and last. So what led you to that? And then this particular story.
Yeah. So this one's definitely not going to be my last. I've got another one.
Sweet.
Underway. It's called The Priest, another short title. But the way that I began the file, oddly, was hitchhiking in exactly the African jungle in which the book starts out. After university, I a bit like you, spent some time in Africa and somehow ended up hiking through the mountains of Uganda in the deepest rainforest that one can imagine. Nobody went there but hunters. And as I did that, a story like this occurred to me. When you look into the recesses of the jungle like that, and you're so far from any kind of civilization that you can imagine, you just imagine, well, what if this happened or that happened? And I had the idea, it wasn't exactly this story, but I had the idea for a story that was a little bit like what the file ended up being. It germinated for 25, 30 years. It sat there in the back of my mind and on a yellow notepad in a very summary form. Being a lawyer, and I'm a lawyer who does effectively court cases, I need to tell stories. I have to tell truthful stories as a lawyer, but essentially you tell a story to a tribunal, explain to them what happened and who was right and who was wrong and what the consequences of that should be. And in a way, that's what you do as a fiction writer. Also, going back to what we discussed a moment ago, you tell a story. You have more freedom in telling that story, but as I told stories as a lawyer, I never forgot the one that I'd started out in mind while hiking in the jungle.
I think you're really right, because that's what hits the heart of people. And so court cases, you've got jurors, they're not going to care about all the little ding, 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 finer things. You got the one, the nuts and bolts people, 1 out of 10, right? 2 out of 10. Then the rest, it's going to be, I want the story.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to sway somebody is that story going to resonate to be truthful, like you're saying,
And even
it truly is.
Even with the nuts and bolts people, if you have, for example, a judge or an arbitration tribunal, deep down, they also care about the story. They won't pay attention to the nuts and bolts, but they'll do it in the setting of a story. You need to be able to tell a story, a narrative.
I really believe in that. I mean, even just as I used to do a lot of music as a vocalist and songwriter, and it was always the story. It wasn't about what rhymes. It was how could you portray this story, and then you could fix things. You didn't have the story first, and it didn't matter if you weren't 100% on remembering every lyric. And I hate it when you watch musicians just keep looking at their iPad for their lyrics. I'm like, tell the story. You can't tell the story by looking at your iPad. Stop it. Just hate
and when you think about some of the great songs of our time, whether it's From Boulder to Birmingham or Whiskey Lullaby, they tell stories.
So, are you going to do a music playlist to this? Because it's already Creedence Clearwater. You got to run through the jungle. Come on, you got to have some. You've got to. I was like, as soon as you were talking, I was like, oh, we got to have that. Are you going to do like a music playlist for the book? I think it would be so cool.
I hadn't thought about that. I think that's a brilliant idea. I will turn my mind to that next.
I hope so, because it would be so cool, because you've got all this global music happening too.
And
then just kind of like the tension. Now, what about movies?
Yeah, so movies definitely a movie's definitely a possibility. I've been talking to some folks. You never know how things develop.
Cool.
It's a big enterprise, but and I think there's definitely some filmable scenes in the file.
Oh, this is very cool. This is very cool. So then you've got another one coming up. You said The Priest.
The Priest.
Ooh.
Yeah, The Priest is different. This one has a male protagonist. He's an Asian orphan, actually, who gets adopted in Italy, and then bizarrely ends up in China, sent there after a misspent youth as a priest in the Catholic Church. And it's about what happens to him there. And I don't want to go further at this stage.
No, but we got, but the little taste is good.
Yeah,
taste is good. So it seems that you're writing a lot from global perspectives. Is that something from your travels that you let me, because you're American, but now you're in London. So it seems that you're pretty global.
Very much so. I am definitely American. Passport's American and only American. But at the same time, international. I'm an Army brat. I grew up on U.S. military bases all over Europe, France, Germany, and then have spent my whole professional life here in London. I'm speaking with you today from London, and most of my work has been either in Europe or Asia, Latin America. I do things in the U.S., of course. My kids are in the U.S. Professionally, I go to the U.S. Quite frequently, but inevitably, I think like a lot of Americans, I have these days, I have a pretty international, pretty global lifestyle perspective.
It's so cool. It has really changed. I remember just, I think more people are traveling now in their youth further than before. It's
I think
become,
that's right. Yeah.
I
And
think it's become better and working and doing it. You know, we could do it now where we couldn't before as
no, that's
much, you know?
100%. And I think all the sort of the very Zoom platform that lets us do this also lets us, as many people experienced during the pandemic, let us work remotely. And the remote place, it can be in North Carolina, where I think you are right at the moment,
Yeah.
or it could be
Right.
perhaps not North Korea, but it could be South Korea, right?
Hey, I have a friend who went to North Korea, and that was a trip.
That,
Oh my
that would be a third spy thriller, I think.
Oh my gosh, the stories he told from that, it's kind of freaky what he went through.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean, there was
it's
no
very,
communication with him when he was there.
Yeah.
And it's like they lights off at that, like the whole, like you're in this, you're staying here. And when they say it's lights out, it's lights out. That's
well,
it.
truly is lights out.
Oh man, that's some freaky stuff. But that would be a good spy story, like trying to get into North Korea and walking in that, like that tweener zone between South Korea and North Korea. Like, hello. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah. Oh my gosh, no. I don't know. I'll go back to Africa though. I miss Africa for sure.
It's an amazing continent.
Yeah.
Absolutely is, yeah.
Have you
And
gone back?
I've been back many times. Yeah, I spent a lot of time
Okay.
in Sudan, a lot of time in
Oh wow.
Ethiopia, sometime in Ghana, and numerous other countries. But in particular, Sudan and South Sudan specifically.
Oh wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm homesick for it. Like, you know, once it gets in, they always say that once you get to Africa, you get dirt under your fingernails.
You never get it out of your
You
system.
never do. And it's, you know, I was like pretty much raised mostly there. And, you know, now it's like, now I'm like, oh, I've been in the States longer than I was in Africa. It's time to go. So I'm just saying, you know, it's kind of weird how it is, but we've got a global world. And I think that's the beauty of now. And for readers, I think what's great about what you've got in your story is it attracts readers from different countries as well. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
I would hope so. Yeah. The book
Yeah.
starts out in Africa. There's a lot that takes place also in other places, especially
Switzerland
Italy
too.
and Switzerland. Yeah, but I do think a little bit like Africa, and for that matter, America being enormously diverse, the book is also pretty diverse. It has different locations, very different kinds of characters.
I
I
love the
don't know.
cover, by the way, because the cover reminds me of old school like movies. You know,
Yeah,
it's
that
got
was
that
my
kind
publisher's idea. We tinkered
cool.
with it, but you can see the down Nazi bomber half covered with vines in the background. That's where, and Sarah obviously is front and center. That's where
There's really,
finds
yeah,
the
don't mess with
vines.
Sarah.
Yeah, and then
I don't
she's
wanna mess
got her
with her.
bamboo spear there. That's after she's
She's gonna get you.
done a Russian or two in their tents at night, and you can see the slash that we referred to, her sewing herself up in the beginning,
Oh,
just on
no,
her
because
chest.
even that, I'm like, no. But, you know, but I like that you incorporated her breathing. She's got to take the breathe, you know, like breathe for pain, because I know that's what people do. You have to breathe it out, you know. So it's I didn't like that part. I'm just saying. I mean,
Yeah,
you're not supposed to.
it's
But, you know,
exactly, that's supposed to introduce you to her
her
and
personality.
what she's faced with. Exactly.
Well, she's tenacious. That's cool.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I have to say, I fell in love with her writing this book.
Did she talk to you while you were writing?
Absolutely. She changed her mind.
Oh.
Like I would have ideas about what a chapter ought to do. And this sounds strange, but she would resist. I try to write her doing something and she would fight back. I know it sounds
That's
odd for me to
wild,
say
isn't it?
she fights back, but there would just be times when it was almost like there was a person saying, I don't want to do this. I want to do this.
Well,
other
this
thing.
is weird. So are you gonna do like an audio version of this?
I hadn't thought about that.
I hope you do.
Talk to I can certainly try. I've read it out loud to friends, to colleagues, to whatnot.
But I mean, could you imagine like if you did an audio version of this? Because I know so a lot of people that are blind, they love audiobooks, so they don't get to read. So there's a huge, and most
or
people are
that
reading.
want to arrive to work and
Yeah,
listen
drive
to
the
it on
Audible
whatever.
audience is massive. But what I was gonna say is like, if you were to do that and you have her part, are you gonna would you gauge the vocalist by her voice that you hear? Like, isn't that weird? Like
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting.
It is.
Like when you write, like you're going to go, no, it needs to be this voice. This is what I heard. That's kind of weird. Like, and how do you even do that? I need someone with a deep voice. I need someone with a high pitched, whiny voice. You know,
Sarah definitely doesn't have a high pitched.
no, there's no whininess. No, she's no whiny. But like that's kind of an interesting thought process to go through.
I like the idea of an audiobook. Do you think there'd be interest in an audiobook?
Oh God, yes. Oh my gosh, because so many people I know, like they're always saying, "Oh, is the audiobook out yet?" And I'm like, "No," and they're like, "Oh." I'm like, "Ooh, no, that's your answer." That's it. Like most people I know,
it wouldn't be that difficult, I don't think, to do it. I'd love to read it.
You have to get good people, and yeah, you can do it. I mean, there's all kinds, but I just want to. It's just interesting to me, like how do you choose the audio, the voice? You know, you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, the choosing various aspects of the book was a real challenge. I think I said a few moments ago that when you sit there looking at a blank piece of paper, trying to figure out how you set a particular scene, everything from what are people wearing? Is it night? Is it daytime? Is it cold? Is it warm? How fast do things go? Is there dialogue? Isn't there dialogue? It is such an extraordinary sort of infinite array of possibilities and combinations. Figuring out how you tell the story is a real challenge.
And getting it right for the setting. Yeah. You know what I mean? Did they, they may have a bomber, but did they have this at this time? Do you have cell phones at that time? Do you have, all 100%. Of that?
Yeah, it has to be historically correct. It has to be historically accurate, also geographically and realistically and so forth. It has to actually be what a Ugandan jungle looks like, or what the Sahara Desert or the Zurich cityscape looks like.
It's like going to a massive grocery store and putting the right ingredients together.
100%. It's like a recipe only.
Yeah. It's hard. And then once you've done it, it's like, wow, this is really hard. This is a pain in the butt, but I want to do it. And then next thing you know, like, okay, I've done it. Now I'm going to have to do it again. Right. It's kind of that, right? It's like, once you've kind of done the first one, you better go all the way in.
And of course, once you're done, what does it mean to be done? Once you're done with the first draft, in a sense, your work has only begun.
Right, that's what I mean.
Then you have to start editing it, and it changes in the editorial process as well. I still think, though, that the hardest step is actually when you sit down to begin writing the first chapter, to turn it from an outline where the basic plot, the characters, turn it to an outline where from an outline to actual text, what the first chapter is going to actually read as, and that making yourself do that is just super challenging.
Yeah. And then did you read the book? Like, did you have to walk away from it to read it from the beginning?
Yeah.
And not be too close to it. Like you have to.
Exactly. You have to. I do this with my legal writing too. I always pretend someone else wrote it. I'm not invested in this. If there's something wrong here that can be corrected or improved, it's not me that I'm correcting. It's almost like someone else wrote it and I'm trying to make it better. It's not always an easy task. Sometimes when you sacrifice a couple chapters saying,
you cut the babies.
Yeah, exactly. You feel like you're disowning your kittens or something.
It's hard. It's hard when on any art form to cut the babies. But you have to do it. It's like cutting your ear off, maybe, but then they said Van Gogh didn't do it. So, so who knows? But it's an interesting thing going back and reading your own work for proofreading and going through that. We read in different accents, because then it's
that is so true. And it's astonishing how long some glitches can persist, notwithstanding having reread it, literally dozens of times.
It's not grammar per se, as like, did your character turn into a man, or did you know what I mean? Did you have someone going down this way of the street and suddenly you swapped it over by accident? You know what I mean? Like which direction? It's little things like that can just ruin a whole book. You know
Actually,
what I mean?
my publisher had an editor who I was a little bit astonished. I think every author is probably skeptical about having some editor come in and look at what they do. I certainly was, but she did a brilliant job, and she caught a number of things that, notwithstanding my dozens of rereads with a little bit of distance, I hadn't caught, and it made it a better work for.
I think editors are invaluable.
Yeah,
they are.
I'm sold.
When the first beginning of self-publishing came out, beyond the vanity press, we'd get all these requests, and you start to read a book. And I remember a friend of ours, we take it, we lived in Mexico for a while. We'd bring him books down and say, okay, what do you think? What do you think? And I remember him going, okay, here's my stack of books. And he's very well read man, very global, everything, USC, graduated, everything. And he goes, this book, and he would just throw it across the room.
Ouch.
Towards the fireplace. He goes, and I won't repeat anything he said, but it was about like people you want to publish something, you want the world to see this craft and all this work you've done. If you don't have that step of an editor, you've lost all this work you've done, and you're also annoying the people who purchased and said, okay, we're going to invest time in your book. So I think it's really good about editing, honestly.
It's also, the unfortunate part as well is some of those books might actually have a really good story underneath the mistake, and a good editor that can bring out that story, make sure the mistakes don't distract from it, make suggestions about what could be done, can allow something to really be a positive thing, a success.
Exactly.
But if you just do it on your own, you might flounder about.
But this goes back to where we started. It's all about relationships.
Indeed.
See, we did a full circle.
Publisher and also relationships. This is important. Relationships with your characters. I think my relationship with Sarah, but also some of the other characters. This sounds strange as well, but you really do form relationships with those characters. You have to understand them as people, just like you have to understand the real people in your life. You have to understand the characters in your book, and I literally fell in love with Sarah.
So like when you go out and have a cup of coffee, you go, hey, Sarah, would you like this coffee? She goes, no, I don't drink this.
More drastic stuff like that. More drastic things than that.
Well, you got to have her, the persona, the character, like what she likes, what she doesn't like. And
100%.
Yeah, really. Oh, very cool. What's it makes life rich doing these kinds of things, writing and then being able to read them. I mean, if we didn't have books, where would we be? Oh my gosh.
I heard some public figure, I forget exactly who, just in the last month or two, say he never read a book. And I felt so sad.
Oh, I have a funny feeling I know who that is, but I won't go there.
You might well. But I think that's such a tragic commentary that you never read a book. It's like, I don't know, like I never knew a person, or I never heard a song.
Don't do that to the music too. That's really bad. Like, you can't take the music away. No. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and very excited for your release. Again, everyone, The File by Gary Bourne, out through Histra Books, March 28th, 2023. Appreciate having you on the show, and everyone keep up with us at bigblendradio.com, and everyone can go get it at all the big bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of that, right? And go get it there, and ask your bookstore to carry it. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Lisa. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, and thanks so much for the comments.
Thank you.